I need support staff to clear the room. Stand up and walk.
Hello and welcome to The Watch. My name is Chris Ryan. I am an editor at TheRinger.com, and joining me in the studio, begging for God's forgiveness for his participation in Boogie Nights, it's Andy Greenwald! Did you like how I did the crucifix as I was going back?
I do, and what I wanted to say now, for the permanent public record, is when they told me they were taking the plaster cast, I did not know what it was for. My involvement was, meant to be anonymous.
Classic Boogie Nights humor.
Yeah.
Greenwald, what's up?
Because he's got a big one in the
It's
movie.
Thursday. It's The Watch re-up.
Yeah.
We are so excited to be here with you today. A couple of things we're going to hit today. We are going to talk about Mark Wahlberg's shame at his participation in Boogie Nights. We're going to talk a little bit about this Paul Thomas Anderson trailer. Speaking of Boogie Nights, Paul Thomas Anderson has a new movie coming out circa Christmas. It's called Phantom Thread. It stars Daniel Day-Lewis and what he is saying will be his last film performance.
Yes.
We are also going to preview the second season of Stranger Things and talk a little bit about The Good Place and Walking Dead. So chock full of stuff today.
Content.
Also some listener questions at the end. Monday, here's the deal. Stranger Things season 2, rather.
I think we should actually...
First 3 episodes?
Let me stop you there. Let's do season 1 on
Let's
Monday.
run it back.
Let's just slow culture.
Dare we say binge mode it?
Well, not a bad idea.
We'll do second season, the first 3 episodes
Yes.
on Monday.
And
As you may or may not know, hopefully you do, if we've been pumping you full of the Deuce content recently. On Sunday night is the Deuce finale.
Season 1 finale.
We will be joined by Deuce staff writer, Megan Abbott,
And
who's
novelist,
also
yeah.
an awesome novelist, and she's going to be calling in. So we'll be talking to her about the finale of the Deuce.
yeah, catch up on the Deuce. The Deuce is great.
And Deuce writers, come on, don't be the last one to join us.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Richard Price, Simon, holler up.
Lisa Lutz, we hear you.
Okay, so Andy, let's quickly get into what was a sort of an unexpected moment of levity this week. Mark Wahlberg talking to the Chicago Tribune. I'm not trying to make fun of his religious beliefs. Far be it from me to question a man's faith. But if Mark Wahlberg is asking for forgiveness for things, don't ask for forgiveness for Boogie Nights.
No. That you have to have a reckoning with yourself.
Yeah.
If you want to be serious.
This is one of the 3 best things Mark Wahlberg's ever given us. Would you like to know the other 2?
Yeah.
The Gambler
Wow.
and The Departed.
That's it?
What else would you put in there?
Andy Samberg's impression of him on Saturday Night Live. I'm very grateful for that. Look, I just feel like if you want to get right with God, at least the top 3 major gods,
Yeah.
you're going to have to look in the mirror. And looking in the mirror means looking at those Transformers 4 and 5 posters that are hanging behind you.
Here's the quote. I just always hope that God is a movie fan and also forgiving.
Yeah.
The latter is something that he prides himself on. Because I've made some poor choices in my past.
Yeah.
Boogie Nights is up there at the top of the list.
Wow. Is this the same Mark Wahlberg who starred in a movie in which he was a science teacher and discovered that trees were killing people?
Yeah.
He did that movie,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And he thinks
He also
God,
plays a nuclear physicist named Cade Yeager in the Transformers movies.
is God Armand White in this thing? And he's just only likes really bad movies to make a point?
I don't know.
Wow.
I don't know. Okay, that was Paul Thomas Anderson's. That wasn't his debut feature.
Second movie.
It was his second movie.
After Sydney, a.k.a. Hard 8.
That's right, which is also very good. But his his latest film,
By the way, God loved that one.
yeah,
He's a big fan.
his latest film is going to be Phantom Thread. I keep wanting to say The Phantom Thread.
That's because it's the Phantom Menace.
Right. And it stars Daniel Day-Lewis as, I don't know if you know this. Do you know what his character's name is?
I do, but I have been waiting all week to hear you say it.
Reynolds Woodcock.
Now, not related to Mr. Woodcock, the Billy Bob Thornton, Sean William Scott film. Are we sure it's not in continuity?
I totally forgot about that.
I think this is part of the Woodcock expanded universe. Am I the only one making this connection?
Yes.
You need me on this wall.
Wow, I feel like we really miss you on the internet, man. Nobody's pointed that out to me yet.
Well, that's what I'm here for.
Did you ever see Mr. Woodcock?
I know, but I feel like I get the gist.
I feel like I saw some of it on a plane. Anyway, this is we're being silly, but I'm really looking forward to this movie quite a bit. The trailer dropped, I think, on Monday.
Yeah.
And it just looks gorgeous. It looks like a Paul Thomas Anderson movie. Rhythmically, in terms of and the emotions and the tones it's sort of playing with, it reminds me more of The Master than any other PTA film. And it even seems to have that overall theme of master and pupil, of teacher and student, of
And maybe those rules
of
are
artist and muse.
reversed?
Yeah, and I think that
Podcast co-host and podcast co-host, dare I say?
and it's about a 50s and 60s. I think it spans some time. Fashion designer living in England, and he meets a woman who becomes his muse, but obviously there's a codependency involved. It's very vague. PTA movies are not deep on plot. You don't need to know what the what Emperor Snoke is up to when you're getting into the Phantom Thread. But
Look, a couple things about this trailer. Obviously, I'm going to see this movie.
Yeah.
If you care about movies, and if you're like me, if you're like God, you're going to see this movie
Right.
because you're a big cinephile. This trailer's too long. Because it's too long.
what?
Here's the thing.
Why?
Because either they are not telling us something about the movie, like Snoke did it, or there's some big secret, or there's some other third act. There's something else going underneath the surface, underneath the hems, if you will.
Sure. In the canvas.
Or this is a very taut character drama that doesn't need 3 minutes of escalating tension to sell us on it, because we're going to see that movie anyway.
Yeah,
So
that's an interesting question. Is if I just say the words Paul Thomas Anderson
new
film,
movie.
yes, right. But
That's great.
I think that the reason why first of all, Paul Thomas Anderson, I think he does cut them himself, is very good at trailers.
Yeah,
And often puts stuff in his trailers that doesn't show up in the film itself, and does a really good job.
just
at,
like Rogue One.
yes,
Did he cut that trailer?
yeah, Bob Iger cut that one
Because that trailer, by the way, is still the best Star Wars movie.
Yes, that's true. And there's a lot in that trailer, a fair amount in that trailer never showed up in Rogue One. But he does work on his own trailers. There's footage in there that you don't see. There's footage in the Master that's not in the Master. And I think that it kind of gives him a sense of I don't want to say relevance, because I think his films will always be relevant, but as a filmmaker, you're always in danger of falling into that. I put out a movie every 26 months. It's kind of about the same stuff. Hope you come see it.
Well, to that point, what's interesting to me about this trailer is that it appears to be set in the UK.
It is, yes.
I was a big fan of a theory, or at least a working hypothesis, that PTA's movies in general were about America.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this can't be about America.
Well,
I don't know.
and specifically California.
And about the different eras of California, boom and bust, and specifically about the psychology of this one place. And I'm not saying he shouldn't go off and make another movie, but that was interesting to me. So that suggests a departure certainly in one large respect.
Right.
The second thing that I'm thrilled about in this trailer, that, by the way, I'm right, it was too long.
I don't know.
That's my take.
If you watch the trailer, that's your fault.
Do you want me back on the internet making takes like that? Because I would burn this whole web down. Daniel Day-Lewis is, I guess maybe was, since this may be his last film, not just one of our greatest actors, but if he wanted to be, could be one of our greatest movie stars.
I thought you were going to say one of our greatest designers.
One of our greatest Mark Wahlberg impressionists.
Yeah.
He is so dashing and charming and effortlessly like Cary Grant or Fred Astaire in Funny Face in this trailer. Obviously with menace and other things lurking beneath it, but it's effortless for him to do this. And usually when he's in a movie, he likes to completely disguise himself.
Yeah.
My Left Foot, Gangs of New York, Lincoln, Transformers 4. Most people don't know he was Bumblebee in that movie, but he lived life as a small yellow car for a number of years. Did you like my commitment to that?
He actually... I was going to make a joke about the boxer, but never mind.
No?
No.
Look, it's
Nobody cares about my Marvin Hagler jokes.
It's nice to see that aspect of his talent being showcased, even if it's just for the trailer. And it's it turns out the movie is in fact a sequel to the gym teacher romp.
So
Mr.
to review,
Woodcock.
we are in on Boogie Nights.
Couldn't be more in on Boogie Nights. By the
Out
way.
on Mark Wahlberg apologizing to God for it.
Happy 20th anniversary Boogie Nights. Right?
In on Phantom Thread, in on Phantom Thread. Out on the Phantom Thread trailer being longer than, what's the over-under that you're willing to accept for a
I want a
Phantom?
hot 90.
90 seconds?
Yeah, man.
But this is like 120 seconds.
This is like almost 3 American minutes.
Okay.
I'm a busy guy. I don't have time for that.
The metric system, no. And so...
Are we doing Boogie Nights for rewatchables? Is someone doing it?
I don't know that that's been discussed.
Because I don't know of a more rewatchable movie, and maybe that it's 20 years on. Maybe we need
I
to revisit
disagree.
this.
Can I tell you something really quickly? Can we go off menu a little bit, Zach? Here's a more rewatchable movie.
When Zach is waving his arms like that and running a slashing gesture across his neck, does that mean go ahead?
A more rewatchable movie is Goodfellas. And I feel like now
Okay.
Goodfellas is underrated. Have I told you about this recently?
No. Goodfellas. Yeah, I agree.
Adam Naiman wrote a piece about The Snowman, which was edited by Thelma Schoonmaker, longtime Scorsese editor.
Mr.
Apparently,
Police.
her work on Snowman is a performance piece.
Yeah, it's like,
what if I didn't edit it?
Right.
But he reminded me, Thelma Schoonmaker, responsible for, in his words, and I agree with him, the greatest montage in the history of film.
100%.
Layla.
Yeah.
Second half of Layla, pianos, guys falling out of the dump truck. Goodfellas might be
The
underrated.
guy looks like Eugene Levy hanging in the meat locker.
Yeah.
Of course.
Frankie Carbone.
Look, Goodfellas, I see where you're going in here. And by the way, side note, I would pay money for the Schoonmaker cut of the Phantom Thread trailer. I feel like that's what the streets are asking for. I think
it's Schoonmaker. I'm sorry, Thelma.
I big watch fan. big watch fan. I think I actually think you're right. I can. There are
Thelma Schoonmaker only listens to Against All Odds with Cousin Sal.
Is that her life?
It's true.
Is she about that?
She's a degenerate gambler.
It's kind of interesting talking about these two movies, and maybe we can put this off into another discussion later down the line. But Boogie Nights obviously hugely indebted to Goodfellas.
Sure.
There's the Copacabana scene in one, and then there's the oneer through the restaurant at the beginning of Boogie Nights. You couldn't have one without the other, and they hit a lot of the same emotional beats. Only one of them has Alfred Molina in essentially an adult diaper while a small Chinese boy sets off firecrackers in the background. So, your mileage may vary, but they are two perfect films.
Yeah, so I don't know. Boogie Nights, all those films, we got to put them in the rewatchables queue. Okay, last in or out? I just wanted to ask you this really quickly.
Yeah.
Are you going to read the Jan Wenner biography?
Oh, I'm glad you brought this up. I'll tell you what I am going to do. I am going to go to bed and then wake up with a little insomnia and just impulse purchase it on Amazon on my phone.
Has that been happening a lot with you?
The impulse purchasing biographies?
Yes.
Or the not sleeping?
Both.
Well, yeah, honestly, yeah. So I did start it, and I think this is going to be really interesting. It is longer than the Phantom Thread trailer. It is 500 pages, but I think this whole thing has been fascinating. So for people who don't know, just quick background on this, Jan Wenner.
There was this thing called magazines.
It used to be that you would go to a store and buy bound together paper for news. And Jan Wenner, creator of Rolling Stone, one of the most influential magazines, one of the most influential tastemakers and publishers, basically decided, as magnanimous rich guys do, that it was time for his story to be told, and bestowed the honor upon this New York reporter named Joe Hagan, and encouraged everyone to call him and collaborate with him. And it's not authorized, but it was permitted, right?
Yeah,
it was
sure.
encouraged. And Hagan apparently reported the living shit out of it and talked to everyone. And everyone talked the living shit about Jan Wenner, who then, finally getting a copy of it right before publication, has disowned it. So this already makes for great copy. I think this is... I'm more interested in this than I thought I would be, just because of the era that it's talking about, and now looking back as whatever the role of rock and roll in the culture is today seems to be certainly on the wane. To think about how it was intentionally created and intentionally promoted, and the way it was seen. Not because, okay, I'll put it this way. Growing up, you probably, like we both of us started reading Rolling Stone maybe in the late 80s, looking at issues and getting more into it
and
later.
making the cover of Rolling Stone was like making the cover of Sports Illustrated. It was essentially the most important place you could be in music or sports.
And I remember buying an issue that was like the 100 Essential Albums of the 80s. They put it out in London Calling by The Clash was number one.
Rolling Stone album guide, very fundamental in mapping out my music listening tastes.
Pre-internet, sort of making your taste. But one thing for us who inherited this, post-baby boomer considerably post-baby boomer generation, thank you very much. It all felt like Mount Rushmore. Like all these people, the Mick Jaggers, Paul McCartney's, all the people who are quoted in this book, and even the idea that Wenner and Rolling Stone were the tastemakers, this all felt pre-existing. It was like this was the firmament that existed before we were born and was always this way. Now to look back and realize, oh, well, he was calculating, he was savvy, he was,
whatever. Being associated with fame,
being associated with fame, promoting people at the expense of others, promoting a narrative that put rock and roll in the center of the culture, but also put Jan Wenner and Rolling Stone in the center of the culture, I find very fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, we don't really... I wonder even when Joe Hagan started this piece, if he could have envisioned a time where magazine editors-in-chief as avatars for, multi-million-dollar brands and lifestyles and worldviews, like, Bill had Graydon Carter on this past week, just these people are kind of last of a dying breed to some extent. And the idea that a magazine editor-in-chief was just literally the gatekeeper to what so many people got their sort of perspective from. They got their taste from these magazines, and these magazines were a pyramid, and somebody sat at the top and was like, that's not us, this is.
Yeah, or in Jan Wenner's case, that's not Us Weekly, this is Us Weekly, because he's responsible for that too.
Very well played.
But to listen to Graydon on Bill's podcast, which I think people should do, it almost felt like a time capsule itself to listen to this guy in his 60s now, who for us, we're like, well, of course there's a famous rich guy who can just open restaurants and run Vanity Fair like a personal fiefdom, and he not even a bad way, just his taste determined this.
Yeah.
That feels incredibly outdated. Almost that when he and the editors of his generation have sort of pulled up the stakes, all of a sudden we're like, oh, this was what was keeping this afloat.
Sure.
But as also revealed in that interview, Graydon Carter had the idea to have a Oscars after party, which again, incredibly exclusive. We didn't get to go to that. No. Most people don't get to go to it. But what he, by creating that and by perpetuating it, helped redefine or define celebrity, who was famous, who was a star for 20 years.
Right.
So the effects of it were felt in the culture.
Sure, they were real. Yeah.
But to hear him talk to Bill and talk about like trying to cover whether it's celebrity or news in the age of the internet or in the age of Trump, it's just like, how did any of this exist? I just can't believe a biography of Jan Wenner, to go back to that.
So in some ways...
it feels like a historical artifact as opposed to, considering he just basically, he put the magazine up for sale this year.
That's right. So we'll be checking that out. We're in on the biography.
Quick Mick Jagger side,
Mick Jagger side note, sure.
Well, no, that was...
Anytime you want.
I was giving it away. Quick Jan Wenner side note, what is your favorite Mick Jagger solo album?
I'm actually more into the Expensive Winos, the Keith Richards side project.
Yeah, 1,000%. Main Offender is no joke.
Yeah.
One of my favorite records from that era. But so do you stand by the 5-star review of Got Us in the Doorway?
I can't say that I'm too familiar with that one.
I don't remember them all right now, but one of the most impressive things that my high school buddy, our buddy Matt, ever did was he in high school he titled a run of AP English papers after Mick Jagger solo albums.
How did Matt do in AP English?
They all slipped right by.
Yeah.
Like the one about Maya Angelou and I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings was called She's the Boss. This is true. I don't.
Oh my gosh.
And our teacher did not notice any of this. Maybe
because he probably was like, he just named a paper about Maya Angelou after a sitcom.
And oh no, that was Who's the Boss?
Oh, I thought it was She's the Boss.
To be clear,
Who's the Boss is like the whole eternal question. Is it Tony or is it Angela or is it Mona?
You're giving your bias away. It was Angela. It was Judith Light. She's
right.
Clearly the boss.
Right.
But it left it an open question because in that era, America wasn't sure, whether we could accept a single mom as the boss. And frankly, probably still can.
Well, speaking of America in a different time, let's talk about Stranger Things. Big show, big future. Why did they have to be so strange? And what if they were not things?
When I was young, the things were normal.
Well, that's a good segue. Because one of the things I've been thinking about a lot for the second season of Stranger Things, I am trying to resist reading anything too extensive about the season.
Which, by the way, I was too, which is why I didn't read anything you wrote about it until all of a sudden, big time Chris was like,
well, because I didn't really write about the show.
I know, and I really, let me say, I really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much. I was, part of the pleasure of Stranger Things, what was, I guess, a year and a half ago now? Year ago, was the word of mouth phenomenon that happens so rarely in pop culture these days, because usually these things feel prepackaged as like, you better do it. It's a sensation already. And Stranger Things was something that had a very organic kind of like, damn, did you check out Stranger Things? This is like really good, dude.
Yeah.
And then Barb happened, and then more and more people watched it, and then I feel like people rewatched
Don't
it.
use passive voice like you didn't take part in making Barb happen.
I did make Barb. I helped Barb along. I think that there are other people who are more centrally responsible for
her journey.
For her journey. Not the least of which is Shannon Purser herself, the actress behind Barb. But so this season comes with a different set of circumstances because I think there's been so much anticipation. There's been so much coverage of it. The reviews came out this week. I did not read any of them. I've read a little bit of stuff from the Duffer Brothers about what to expect this season, but what I wrote about was a Stranger Things syllabus, which we sometimes do from time to time, where it's like, hey, Twin Peaks is coming back here. Read these 5 things about David Lynch. Watch these 3-4 things. Listen to these pieces of music. I tried to put myself in a little bit of a different headspace where I was like, what was it like for kids in 1984, which you and I were?
We sure were.
A little young to be really out there on these streets. But,
It was a different time, man. We could ride our Huffies.
we did. But I sort of tried to put myself in the headspace of like, what was it like for a teenager in 1984? What were the movies showing you? What were you hearing on the radio? What were the events happening around you? And what would that do to you if you were a character on this show? And it's a little bit of like a strained premise, but the premise basically being like, the thing, first of all, holy shit, 1984. Nice job. Nice job.
Pretty rich year.
You just like look up the list and it's like, yeah, Terminator, good movie. Beverly Hills Cop, pretty good movie.
Yeah.
And then it's like Karate Kid,
Right,
16 Candles, Gremlins, Ghostbusters. And then the music is just one of the all-time great years. The holy trinity of Purple Rain, Like a Virgin, Born in the USA, and kind of living in the wake of Thriller, which came out the year before. And to say nothing of all the incredible punk rock, burgeoning rap music scene, etc. What I found was that you sort of got a real interesting collision, and I said this, so I'm not trying to jack myself here, but I said this collision between like wonder and horror, which is essentially the recipe for any good Spielberg movie from that period anyway. But you got people who were like, okay, kids are being put in the hero spot.
Yep.
In a lot of movies, you see things where teenagers are being asked to save their town, save the country, save the world, save the universe.
Red Dawn.
Yeah, Last Starfighter.
Yeah.
And if you were a kid in 1984, involved in something even as fantastical as what's happening in the town of Hawkins with these Stranger Things kids, you'd kind of be like, this scans. This is the vibe right now. I am important. People are finally marketing things to me specifically as a consumer. MTV is on all the time.
But also the world feels large. The world feels scary because there is, I don't know if you know this, but back then there was tension with Russia.
Yeah.
So it's hard to imagine.
Yeah, 84 Olympics, Russia boycotts. We had boycotted 80. There's Star Wars, like the missile defense system happening.
And the world doesn't just feel large and scary, but it also feels full of mystery because information is heavily filtered and slow moving to get to you. So this was a time of, and we could talk about this in terms of world events, or we could talk about it in terms of urban legends, but things trickle down to you on the schoolyard or from your parents or from overhearing things, and you were given pieces, but not the whole puzzle.
Yeah.
And one of the things, I think you're about to make the pivot, so if you don't mind me making it too, but one of the things that Stranger Things, the show, gets so right compared to a lot of the more overblown sci-fi franchisey stuff that we get today is these kids aren't necessarily on a wavelength that they are saving the world. They're just trying to save their friend.
Yes.
It's a question of scale that makes more sense for the era, but I think also makes more sense for enjoyable storytelling.
And it's their interaction with the pop culture around them that I think prepares them psychologically for what's happening. I mean, like seeing a Demogorgon is pretty traumatic. And obviously, to my knowledge, no one's ever actually interacted with one. If you have a situation where you're at once watching space shuttles take off, but you also have like missile defense systems and nuclear threats, and I don't know. I thought that was a very interesting way to kind of approach this season. By all accounts, it's a much larger cast, or a significantly larger cast this season. Sean Astin has joined the cast. There's a couple of other people. Brett Gelman is apparently playing like a conspiracy theorist on this year.
That works.
And the touchstones that the Duffer Brothers have suggested that they were sort of drawing from this season were Empire, Temple of Doom.
Not the Fox show Empire.
No,
but
Empire Strikes Back. Temple of Doom. Some of the darker stuff that does that sort of really fine line of putting kids in extreme danger and having real adult consequences. So it'll be interesting to see what they do here because they've got themselves a very hot property that they want to keep going for 4 or 5 years. But they want to introduce stakes to this world.
I think from what I've heard, again, we haven't seen it. I thought maybe, by the way, that I secretly got, like, wink, wink, maybe I had access to them, and I went in my little Netflix screener.
Yeah.
I just had like 6 episodes of Lady Dynamite. No disrespect.
Why did you wink, wink,
to
think
Maria
that?
Danforth? I just thought maybe because everyone else was like, "Oh, I got the screener," so I was
right.
like, maybe Papa Netflix forgot that I'm not really on the beat anymore.
Papa Netflix.
Nah, did not get it. But what I've gathered is that they actively approach the season as a sequel. Now, literally that it is, enough talk of the the 10-hour movie, blah, 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 but trying to treat this season cumulatively as a sequel to what came before, and as you're saying, like Empire, like these other movies where things got a little bit darker. I think that probably makes a lot of sense. I think the idea of this is the rare show that I'm okay with it not working necessarily episodically.
Sure.
But my main thing going into the season that I've tried to keep in my mind is that the first season was incredibly enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
We have had, it truly is a whirlwind. You know, it's hard to believe that Millie Bobby Brown just turned 30. Like, I feel like we just met her yesterday.
Yeah.
But this all happened so quickly and so out of the blue, and people liked it so intensely and so suddenly that the flip to what was wrong with it came very, very quickly. Now there were a lot of flaws in this show.
Can you give me what's the major thing that people say is wrong with it?
Well, this is interesting. I think we've talked about this before, but that a lot of people we know who work in the industry or make things really give it the side eye.
Yeah.
My take on that is they feel it's a weird level of ownership because a lot of people who we know in the industry are the same age as us, and we're the same age in 1984, and we're the same age roughly as the Duffer Brothers, and are like, no, that's my childhood. How did you get to this?
Do you want to know what my response
to
that
first?
That criticism is?
Yeah.
If you were the inventor of Facebook, you would have invented Facebook.
100%. Yeah, I agree. I agree. The thing about Stranger Things, that why it succeeded, it's not rocket science. It was very pleasurable.
Yes.
The kids were good.
Yeah.
It had the correct balance.
Do you know how hard it is to cast a kid?
Yeah.
I have no idea. I've never casted a kid to do anything.
Fair.
Let's just say it's hard.
Yeah.
Imagine casting 6 of them that are really good.
I kind of want you to break down how hard it is.
I think it's
now.
incredibly hard.
Yeah.
I think, and the idea that they get everybody from the tertiary kids to the teens to the like the Ferris Bueller looking homie who's in all the Domino's commercials,
To Barb.
to Nancy, to Barb, and then they have this foresight to get Winona in there and have her do the nervy mom thing, and David Harbour, who's like the classic like gruff cop character. The casting across the board in this show has been uniformly excellent, and I think it goes a long way to elevating what is essentially nothing is like starkly original in this stuff. And if anything, I think if I could raise one concern trolling thing about this season, it's that it was a delightful experience to watch it. I don't know that the underlying mythology of the Upside Down is like interesting.
No,
and if that's
agree with
what
that.
it winds up being, like, we need to take a really hard look at the Upside Down. It's like, you don't really need to do it. It's like a friggin' goo patch in a tree. Like, don't worry about it. There's a monster. It comes out. It goes back in.
Let's focus on the hard things in life, like casting children in dramatic roles. Let's do a multi-part series about that.
Yeah.
Bill Moyers.
I think Human Giant did do that.
Casting children.
Yeah.
An investigative report. No, we said frequently at the end of the first season, which we both liked.
I loved it.
Well, I was saying
I'm not trying to trump you. I'm trying to say I enjoyed it a lot. I was without reservation.
But despite loving it, we both, I think, agreed that we would have been fine if this became an anthology series, if we didn't go back to this town.
Yeah.
Right? That maybe we pick up with, you could keep 11, you could keep, what's his name, Hopper, but like maybe they're in a different town now. Like the risks you run of going back to the same well are great. But if you're treating it like an event, like a return to it, and really celebrating the spirit of those older movies and not celebrating the spirit of watered down sequels, which was very much in keeping with the 80s,
sure,
you might be in for something. There's an element of that era that I think is important to consider when watching this. In all the movies we mentioned, it's there too, which is just outright triumphalism and a kind of weirdly innocent optimism runs through them.
Absolutely.
That's not very much in favor because pessimism has a very good reason to be winning right now. But if you think about those movies, you think about Top Gun, which is a grown-up movie, but they're nominally a grown-up movie.
It's like a Merchant Ivory production,
basically. But there was a belief in the American kid, whether it was Tom Cruise or whether it was what's his name who put water on the Mogwai, that they could triumph.
The Gremlin homie,
my man from Gremlin, Zach something. What was that dude's name?
Yeah, I can't remember.
That they would win and that they were righteous and good and somehow this would work out for them.
Sure.
I'm not mad at these kids winning in Stranger Things, is what I'm saying. I think that's okay.
Yeah.
It's a different way of considering what we value.
You talked a lot about for the Deuce how much you just like hanging out in the places there and hanging out with these people. That's the same way I feel about Stranger Things. I'm down if 2 of these episodes just feel like a John Hughes movie. I don't need this to be like. No. When we get out of it, I'm like, I know the rules of the Upside Down.
Oh God!
And I know all about like the evil in the other dimension and what they need to defeat it. Stephen King novels are not great because they actually have the architecture of the supernatural stuff that's happening that is like, wow, you just can't argue with that. No, it's great because of the setting, the feeling, the atmosphere, and the characters.
And that's why Westworld's bad. Because they have the architecture for all of that. They could give us a PowerPoint dissertation on exactly what everything means and what they're thinking at that moment and what the programming is doing, and I couldn't care less.
Here's a show that maybe could use an upside down. Walking Dead. So I don't know if you know this, but there's like Tiger on Walking Dead now.
I'm listening.
And I saw how that just piqued your interest by saying that. It needs more tigers. I think that the show, it's right there. That's the thing that kind of frustrates me about this, is that there's a lot of stuff about this show that I really, really, really want to be into.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Is it a zombie tiger?
No. It belongs to a member of one of the various rebel faction.
Because I love Life of Pi. Like, that movie is my jam.
You're super nangly.
Because that's a tiger also.
Yes.
So I'm like, maybe transitively I will like this.
I think that I kind of wrote a piece earlier in the year when the trailer for Walking Dead season came out at one of the Comic-Cons, and I was like, this is it, man. Like, go full exploitation, go full grindhouse, shootouts. And I saw some of the longtime fans of the show on our Slack talking about, like, so the most valuable things are supposed to be gasoline and bullets, and that's the thing that they seem to have unlimited supply of.
Yes, they do,
And now it's kind of turned into this nonsense shoot 'em up, and kind of overnight, it seems like everybody speaks like a character from Leviticus. Like, no one actually just talks in a normal way. They all gather and give really bad Any Given Sunday speeches and then fight for 40 minutes. And I think that this, at least for this first episode, and the ratings are kind of steadily slipping a little bit.
Of course.
It just still is caught between taking itself so seriously and not taking itself nearly seriously enough. And that ultimately is my problem with it. You can knock it for its nihilism, you can knock it for its violence, but in the end, I think that when a show goes on this long, there's got to be a tonal shift to like juice it up a little bit.
Or it has to be about something. I think you got it right. I mean, and this is I didn't watch it because I got tired of saying the same things about it, and people got tired of reading me say the same things about it.
But I was kind of like, oh, this would be cool if this was good now.
But we've all been suckered before. There have been good episodes of the show, and it has reversed course to a minor degree. But look, here's the thing: people don't read Playboy for the articles. This is my Walking Dead take.
But I don't
think really,
that
and people watch the show.
Walking Dead is not short of centerfolds. In terms of if your centerfold is a guy eating another guy's brains.
Which, by the way, whatever floats your boat. But, which I think was the plot point in Fear the Walking Dead last season. Fine, but the show seems incapable of admitting just how pulpy and nasty it is. And so it needs to have some sort of high-mindedness. Let me tell you something. There is nothing high-minded about this show. There is, from day one, what made the comic book compelling to people was that there was no hope.
Yeah.
You could maybe pull that off in a long-running serialized comic book, as Robert Kirkman apparently has done. Television, I think, operates under different rules. And if there is no hope, it's just different permutations of horror. It's going to be dwindling results.
Well, you think about when you're looking at a two-dimensional, like a panel comic, a panel of comics, and you're doing half the work.
Yeah,
no matter how
right.
detailed the art is, and no matter how epic the screen is within that panel, within those 2 pages you've got there, you're still inferring everything you know about those characters, everything you know about this world, and then you're imagining what it feels like in space or like fighting Wolverine or whatever it is. When you see something on a screen, the director, the people who are making what you're seeing are responsible for every emotional reaction you are having. And a good filmmaker is in control of that. And I think that I know what they are trying to do with The Walking Dead.
So it is different this season. They're trying to do something different?
No, I think it's getting a little bit more. I think that it's gotten much more into the action vein rather than like kind of a sparse survival tale.
Yeah.
But I think that they're not going full Walter Hill enough, you know?
Is your man Denny from Grey's Anatomy still walking around like latter-day Cody Bellinger? Is that still his vibe?
What?
Just like, batter up!
Latter-day Cody Bellinger.
I mean, when Cody Bellinger lets himself go a
I
little
can't
bit.
top that, man. All right, let's talk about a show we actually like, which is, I want you to just, if people aren't watching The Good Place, tell them in 2 minutes why they should.
I actually have a two-pronged take on the show. The Good Place is the most recent sitcom by Mike Schur, co-creator of Parks and Recreation. terrific tweeter at Ken Tremendous.
Collaborator with our buddy Shea Serrano.
Yeah, Shea Serrano's pulling Mike up a little bit to his level and bringing him a new level of
Turns
internet
out
fame.
the other things in basketball are Mike Schur.
Yeah, as it turns out, not a bad thing. The show premiered last year, was terrific. It's back this year. It's on now. It's an experiment in very, very highly serialized storytelling in the half-hour form. It is incredibly funny and warm, but it is about the afterlife and
ethics.
And basically, it's about how to be a decent human being.
Let me do my John Polito Miller's Crossing thing. Ethics.
Oh, that was good. You want to do it again, or is once enough?
That's good.
Okay. And it is highly serialized. There are cliffhanger endings. There's twist surprises, as there were last season. The season has taken the sort of wild twist that ended the first season and continued to push. I mean, that was a hallmark of Parks and Recreation, too, that despite sitcoms always succeeding due to our familiarity and comfort with the characters, Mike Schur seems to be able to give us people that we feel warmly about, we love to be around, but continually change their circumstance in a way that is gratifying in this binge era of serialized television. I think the show is a marvel. I think Kristen Bell and Ted Danson are two of the best TV actors working. I think the supporting cast is doing that thing that supporting casts do on good shows in second seasons, where we get it now, and now we can run. It's truly a pleasure to watch the show, and yet my feeling after watching these last few episodes was a little bit like, am I in a vacuum watching this? I actually felt a little melancholy about it because I don't know. Maybe people are watching it. Probably maybe 1 million people a week are watching it all told. Hopefully people listening to our podcast are watching it. Mm-hmm. But I was feeling...
It's 1,000,006 now. Yeah.
Nice. Nailed it. Well, actually, Thelma Schoonmaker now knows about it. She hasn't heard us talk about it.
Thelma Schoonmaker, too, yeah.
Macher? Which is it? Schoonmaker?
It's Schoonmaker, I think.
She's Thelma to us.
She edited Goodfellas. She's good.
There's an element of watching these shows that feels better when we're doing it together, right? And it just feels kind of, they're doing all this great work and it will exist, but it feels a little bit lonely. And I'm curious if you have that same experience. And if that feeling I'm having is partly because he's doing this incredible work in a half-hour format that is generally digested or consumed in a more disposable manner. I mean, it's no surprise that that Mike talked to Damon Lindelof in planning the show and talking about it. There are elements of Lost in the show. There are elements about being a human that overlap with The Leftovers. Mm-hmm. And The Leftovers certainly was not a highly rated show, but there's something. You tell me, is this my biases about the 30-minute format coming to play?
I think it's the television lover's lament now.
Okay.
I think it is the concern that you're not part of a community anymore.
Right.
And that if you want to be part of a community, you can, but it feels like those communities are in these little boxes, and that there's not a lot of overlap, and there's not a lot of like cross-referencing of what's happening, and that's because nothing is happening in one chronology anymore. There's no one timeline for television.
Right.
And I'm worried about that for Stranger Things. We've had conversations in our office, but like, so should we do something about the entire season as soon as any one person has finished it? Mm-hmm. Should we just write about it? And now in retrospect, I'm like, well, what if we had done 8 days of Stranger Things, one a day? But most people, I think, are going to start watching it, if not tonight, tomorrow night, and they'll probably be done by Sunday if they are really into it.
Right, and we're not going to be even covering it that way.
No, but I think that your melancholy about Good Place is this idea that there is no longer the feeling that we collectively go home and watch television at night, and that the next day we talk about it. And I think that is, it's disappointing, but I hope that more people are seeing more kinds of stories out there.
That's true.
And that are getting to experience it.
And that's happening, and it will exist forever, and that's basically Netflix and Amazon's strategy, which is we're just going to make as much stuff as humanly possible and win this arms race of content, just build up the biggest army.
And I'm sure this anxiety that we have is not something that 99% of television watchers feel.
Absolutely. I do think, anecdotally, it is something that television creators are beginning to feel.
Sure.
I had a conversation with a TV creator who makes a really good show that we watch and talk about sometimes, and he said that he's feeling disillusioned with television because it feels temporary again, in a way that it suddenly, it did for years. It was sort of disposable, right? Like Robert Guillaume, great actor, passed away this week. how many people have fired up Benson, you know what I mean, or Soap, and gone back to watch those older shows? Not that they don't stand up,
or Sports Night. I mean, like,
but there's the idea that TV was more temporary, and then recently there was this idea that this was the new canon. This was our primary medium for watching things.
70s American cinema reborn
is happening now,
accessible to everyone.
But now this feeling that this stuff just kind of exists, and you either watch it or you don't. Whereas, some movies can still get people out on the first day or, the first week.
Do you think that that's because we're not thinking? Slightly. I mean, we're getting kind of off track here, but do you think that part of that has to do with the shows that are prominent? Like, do you think we don't talk enough about ideas or thematic stuff, and we're more concerned with unpacking things or plotting out where things are going? I think a lot of it is ultimately it's just timeline. It's like Thrones rules because Thrones happens like Super Bowl Sunday, 10 Sundays, 8 Sundays in a row or whatever.
6 Sundays.
4, whatever it is.
Happening.
But something like Mindhunter, which I am now going around to the office in our office being like, have you finished Mindhunter? Have you finished Mindhunter?
Have you?
But it's people are like, I want to, I'm trying, when in the hell are people supposed to watch 10 hours of television?
No, I mean, that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
That I think people are really struggling with. And I do think that, you tell me if I'm being if I'm flattering myself as a former, cultural critic or tastemaker or whatever I was doing, but there was something that felt particularly supercharged about TV in the last decade.
Because there was 5 shows.
Not just because there were 5 shows that a lot of people were watching, but because they felt stitched into our cultural fabric on a real-time level, meaning we felt that we were having a dialogue not just with the show, but the show was having a dialogue with the culture as we were experiencing it, and it felt relevant to our time somehow. And often that was just a matter of happenstance,
but
right?
Isn't that also like what people used to say about classic rock, where it was like Pet Sounds spoke to Sgt. Pepper and
but
vice versa?
So much of that was the Jan Wenners of the world, or later the Emily Nussbaums of the world, writing the salient piece that linked it to something happening in culture and made
that we
people
decided
think
to call
about
it the golden age, or we decided to call it, and then that Landgraf has decided to call it peak TV. These words just come into the,
But whether it was through the design of the show or happenstance of the culture or through cultural arbiters, I think that Breaking Bad has a lot to say and reflects a lot about America in the first part of this century, in a way that makes it even doubly compelling. It works as pure entertainment.
Sure.
But it feels particularly compelling. And, I don't know, and I guess what I'm asking, and I don't have an answer for this, is a show like The Deuce not resonating on that level because it is looking backwards and it's a period piece, or because no one's writing those pieces because not everyone is watching it at the same time? And is that the same with Good Place, which, by the way, a year ago when it premiered, my only criticism of it, which is such a, this is a very silly tangential criticism to make, but I felt like it really felt like a show made for Hillary Clinton's America.
Yeah, I remember that.
Because whereas Parks and Rec felt like a show we kind of need now about like civic do-gooderness, even if it feels kind of out of place. But The Good Place was like, okay, let's take these debates about being a person and let's literally place it in the abstract. Let's put it in the afterlife so we can just have these, not always smart in the case of Jason Mendoza, the character, but... I'm
having that problem with a lot of things beyond television right now.
That's fair.
Is feeling like anything pre-last November is year 0. And it's not true, because obviously these things didn't happen overnight. The things that led to where we are did not happen overnight.
Roy Moore's been throwing heat for decades, man.
So it's really naive to say like all of a sudden we went into to our own upside down, but it's hard for me. I mean, one of the Deuce does not feel resonant in the way that some other shows do, and that I think that I've actually had that issue with Show Me a Hero too. I not that there was nothing wrong with it. Everything about it was like a pure multivitamin of good drama.
Yeah.
But I was like, this feels like it's happening in like the 1800s.
Well,
and it's not. It's like everything that's happening with housing in Show Me a Hero is like coming to pass now.
Maybe this is why Stranger Things is good and will continue to be successful, because it is escapism, and intentionally designed as such. And I was talking to a friend who writes for TV about The Deuce, and she was basically saying that she just can't hang with Maggie Gyllenhaal's character arc, because at this particular moment in time, and literally this week or these last few weeks, to see a character whose arc in the first part of the season is to be brutalized. Now, everyone knew that going into it. This is what the show is about. Maggie Gyllenhaal collaborated with David Simon and George Pelecanos and Megan Abbott, and they were aware of what was being shown, and there was great delicacy and care and consideration given to the plight of her character, Candy / Eileen, who was a sex worker. And what was construed by the show and what she showed emotionally and physically. But this is the world that the show is being put out into, and I don't blame anyone for being like, I can't, full stop. It's interesting. It's interesting to consider the things that will go in the content vault and in the time capsule and exist, have afterlives, future lives, or the things that basically just can't hang because of the moment. And I know there are many people who would prefer, even people who listen to a podcast about TV, who prefer that we adopt a kind of a new critical.
Yeah.
The text is the text.
Sure.
But especially,
that's not what made television conversation interesting in the first place.
I
though.
agree. And also, as we move into this purely bespoke TV culture where everything is on demand, everything is by design, we can decide when and how and why we watch stuff. You can no longer you can't unstitch it. Shouts to Phantom Thread. Shouts to Reynolds Woodcock from the larger culture. We are not all gathering at 8 p.m. on a Thursday to watch The Cosby Show to escape for 30 minutes.
We are
and
not.
by the way, not an escape, as it turns out.
Zach, do you still want us to do questions, or are we running long? Yes?
Well, we cleared the room with that talk.
5,
Yowza. Not
4,
the fun ride that they signed up for.
3, 2. Andy, we do want to get to a couple of listener questions before we go. Chase Gibson wants to know what show has the belt.
God.
I think it's between Deuce and Mindhunter, personally.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting.
Netflix has had actually quite a nice run, but I don't know where to put them on the belt.
What about Red Oak season 3? You not feeling it?
I haven't checked out season 2 yet.
I think it's right. I think that we would. I would love to give it to the Deuce, but I don't know about its cultural footprint, and it was a relatively short season. I think in terms of us and the people we're talking to around the office and the studio, Mindhunter has it.
Yeah.
But it sort of seems silly to give it out the day before Stranger Things 2 comes, to where everything is primed for it to grab the belt. Because remember, the belt is mostly a completely arbitrary award.
But it's about having the capturing the conversation as much as anything else.
Because it's kind of a nostalgic thing for us. We want a show to grab that conversation.
The Disgraceland podcast wants to know, between Deuce and Mindhunter, which has the greatest chance of having a long run and becoming peak TV a la Mad Men and Breaking Bad? It's a great question. I think they both have a shot. I would say the Deuce has a better shot of being that kind of television show. I could see Mindhunter slipping more into famous serial killer of the season. Fincher does one episode or none. So for as much as I adore that show, the means of production over there suggest, hey, we'll do Manson, we'll do Burt, we'll just go through these guys. So it'll be interesting to see how Mindhunter changes over the years. The Deuce, as Pelicanos has kind of laid out to us, has a kind of grander scope than that. Although, like you said, I don't know what people's appetite for that scope is going to be.
Grander scope, but in some ways limited ambition, because, and my answer to this question is neither.
Okay.
Hard neither, no way. Because the Deuce, as exceptional as I think it is by design a more modest project in terms of size. It's 8 episodes this season. From what he told us, and it hasn't been renewed for a 3rd season, of course.
Sure.
We don't know if they have a plan for a 4th season, but the way he spoke about it with us suggested that it was only ever conceived of as a 3-season, 24-episode project.
Yeah.
Which I think means I think that's smart. I think it's going to be amazing. But the shows that he's mentioning are the ones that we lived with and evolved with and grew. And speaking of evolution and growth, Mindhunter, love it, but I don't see the runway. It is specifically about the way people think about things and perception of things and the development of an entire pathology, right? And as we learned from when we talked to Jonathan Groff this week, the character that the man who his character is loosely based on, had basically established this kind of criminal science and kind of lost his mind from it a little bit, had a breakdown.
Right.
I don't know. The shows that he's talking about, these have either redemption arcs or more narrative hooks for us to grab onto. These seem more like very, very high-quality projects, and I would differentiate the two.
Okay, we'll wrap it up there. Next Monday, Stranger Things first 3 episodes, The Deuce Talk with Megan Abbott. The finale is on Sunday. Thank you for listening, and we will talk to you next week.